You know that bit when you're on the plane and you're getting ready to take off and the plane's taxiing around and you're thinking, are we ever going to leave the ground? That bit just before the plane starts to get ready to take off and the engines rev up. No drives inside this, nothing inside. Lovely stuff. Hello and welcome back, and today we're looking at this big bugger. This is the RS2821RP Plus from Synology. It's the latest release in their Ryzen series of devices, and as you can tell, it's pretty big. It's a 16-bay rack mount solution. We will get it out the box in a moment, but I just wanted to give you guys some idea of the scale of this device. I know on the intro we've already slapped on some of the audio of this device, because let's face it, running this thing and trying to sustain this conversation is going to be near enough impossible. So today's video is going to be a largely hardware focused review, but we are going to be doing some software reviews and software utility overviews and checks with this device just to see what it can do, because this isn't the first time Synology have brought out this kind of hardware. They have released this CPU and memory combo, that is the Ryzen embedded V1500 in conjunction with some ECC DDR4 memory, 4GB to be precise. This configuration is actually available in a number of different scales. It's available in an 8-bay rack mount, a 12-bay rack mount, 16-bay rack mount, and a 6 and an 8-bay desktop solution. So we've already got some idea what this system can do, but this is the largest one of that variety that we've seen so far, and I think this is the system that will push that CPU and memory to breaking point. And again, we will cover that in the software and we'll talk about it a little bit now, but for now, let's get this device out of the horrendous amount of packaging, get it here on the table and take a good look at what exactly this giant box contains. Right, so we've got rid of that horrendous box, and this is it, the Synology RS2821RP Plus. Now, full disclosure, throughout this video, I'm probably going to keep forgetting to say that RP bit. That stands for redundant power supply. And I guess the reason they tacked it onto the model ID quite clearly on this device is whereas some solutions from Synology sometimes arrive with a redundant power supply or not, all of this series, this single unit, has RP, and we'll look at that later on. But this is it. This is what $3,000, give or take, buys you these days. And again, that probably doesn't include the tax in your local region. This is a 16-bay solution. Now, straight off the bat, this is very similar to the RS2221 Plus and the RS2421 Plus. This system is incredibly similar to those. It's just moving the budget a little bit more towards storage. Now, if you look at the portfolio from Synology, one of the earliest things you notice there is each of the different devices seemingly provisions the budget one way or another, particularly in this Ryzen series, but they're not the first ones to do that. So when you look at the Intel Atoms in the previous generation that a number of you were less keen on, generally you notice that although the same CPU and memory existed throughout the whole range, the prices were scaled to the storage going up and down, and this is the largest embedded Ryzen solution from their portfolio. Now, it is, I think, in a number of ways, a big jump up from the RS2818RP Plus that came before it, but is it a big enough jump? That is the big question in today's video, because a number of you either own that previous generation device that had a 3-year warranty on it and are thinking about an upgrade, or you missed that generation entirely and went with the one before it, which was also an Atom, the C2538 or 35 even, and wondering, is this a big enough upgrade? And I think in about 3 out of 5 ways, it is a bloody good NAS and a great upgrade over its predecessor. But my complaint about this, and definitely if you've watched any of my other Ryzen videos in the last 5 or 6 months with Synology products, it just feels a bit safe. And that's going to become abundantly clear throughout this video. I think it is a good solution, and if you are looking for a Synology NAS that has got all of that great software and, you know, those premium first-party apps that they talk about, and a bit of brand support at the same time, as it's basically a device that will do exactly what they promise, it's a great device. And also, it's the biggest solution in that portfolio before you have to enter into the Xeons, the FSs, the UCs, the SAs, the X, just all of those systems. This is the last unit in what I would, and I think they as well, would refer to as the SMB series, small, medium, business class devices. This is where the internal hardware stops scaling and the storage does. And then at the next gen, that is when you look at those devices with Xeons at 4, 6 and 8 core processors and hundreds of gig of memory, and that's when the budget slams towards the internal hardware and the storage stays relatively static. So when you get this device, you saw all the packaging, there's all this enormous amount of foam. One sec. This stuff, hugely protective foam when it's in transit. There's tons of this in there, so it's quite well protected in terms of the external packaging when it's in transit. But what I will add is the first thing whenever I look at a lot of Synology rack mounts, and particularly these larger ones, is that they don't arrive with rails. Now, this isn't going to be a video that I'm ragging on Synology throughout this whole thing. I genuinely do think this is a very good solution. But I've got to be honest, when I open up that box, and inside we have our box of accessories, which is great, but no rails? That seems weird to me. Now, I know a number of you do successfully use rack mount solutions without rail kits. You're not using them in a big old tower device. You're using them in standalone scenarios, using compact desktop scenarios, not desktop, compact kind of shelf spaces in attics and such, or you're utilizing them just desktop based. You're sticking them on the desk, particularly with that compact one, the 1221 Plus. But this device at this scale, it's huge. You know, it's a 3U height, which is already pretty aggressive. And it's about 60, I think it's 65 centimeters deep. So that's pretty massive. And this is the sort of device that largely, you know, needs a rack cabinet installation. And with that, you almost always need rails to comfortably use these devices. So it seems really weird that this device, they've clearly made sure it's got redundant power supplies by default, which is good. They know the target demo, but they still don't include the rails, and you have to purchase them separately for about 45 to about 80 quid, depending if you want sliding rails or static rails. And I know it's not a vast sum of money when you're looking at £3,000 getting dropped on this device, but still, I don't understand why Synology don't allow and include rails with a lot of their larger scale devices where I think it's necessitated. Even if they don't include sliding and just go standard static rails by default, to me that's an oversight. But that's enough of that. Inside, accessory wise, we have our quick start installation guide, which again has information. It's quite pictorial, but you're going to get more information by going to the online portal. Inside we also have instructions detailed with regards to the installation of rack mount screws and how the device should be handled. Again, quite light there. I've mentioned the device has got 3 years of manufacturer's warranty, and that can be extended up to 5 years as well with the EW202 warranty extension, which is quite good. But again, I will add, those PSUs are included in the warranty, but at the same time, I would recommend making sure you have one in advance, because if you are going to utilize this device and you're getting it because of redundancy and backups, not the same thing, remember, I'd buy yourself an extra PSU and keep it on a shelf. It's just good sense, because again, PSUs on these devices, these things are on for a very, very long amount of time. And although that PSU is included in the warranty, buy yourself an extra one on day one. So also inside here, we have 2 mains power cables for each of those PSUs. And again, they're UK leads, but of course, wherever you buy it in the world, they'll make sure they're inside. And finally, you've got screws for 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch media. Now, a couple of things when it comes to the media there. First and foremost, these aren't your cheapo click and load trays. We get one of them out of there. These are metal trays in design. Look at the way the lights just absolutely react to hell to those. Now, the screw holes there for 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch media, and that media can be used, if you do put 2.5-inch media inside, that can be used for caching or it can be used for raw storage. And again, that's not the NVMe. There is no NVMe bays on this. We are talking about SATA SSDs there. And of course, 3.5-inch media in there, which you can get now for NAS use. We are looking at about 18 TB maximum at the moment, with 20 just on the horizon with EAMR and HAMR. I will add, however, though, that this system only officially supports Synology hard drives. If you look at the compatibility list for the RS2821RP Plus, the only drives you can get with this system that are on the compatibility list, barring a couple of Toshiba exceptions there, and I think one Seagate drive there, I think even an Ultrastar, the majority of the drives that are supported on this our Synology hard drive. Now, Synology do highlight that there is an element of flexibility to the compatibility list there with regards to capacities that you might want that aren't in their range, but still, if you go to the compatibility listings, you will find that it is just Synology hard drives and Synology SSDs listed there, so do bear that in mind. And of course, we will be using Synology hard drives during our software testing in the next video. But again, you don't have to fully populate this device. You can go ahead and install even one hard drive if you want, although that would be tremendous under use of the device. But what that means is you can go ahead and install maybe 8 drives initially on this device and use a traditional RAID or Synology Hybrid RAID SHR. That is right, this system does support SHR, which is great to hear. And then you can scale that storage depending on how you configured the storage pool and volumes early doors, and then grow your storage over time on this device. You don't have to just stick with the storage on day one. It's also expandable, but we'll talk about that in a bit as well. Even inside, if we remove some of these trays, again, I am going to go ahead and open this. It probably is worth highlighting that around an hour ago, oh, when I say an hour, call it 2.5 hours ago, I got my COVID vaccination jab in my left arm. The consequence is, if I scream with pain while lifting this, you'll have to forgive me. So if we look inside there, you can see those SATA ports there inside. It's lovely and well ventilated and spaced out. But again, no loose cabling, no loose wires. This is a device here that's very clean and clear. And ventilation is incredibly important on this device because the efficiency of this system and the performance at the top end, I think Synology rate it at 2,220 megabytes per second read with a full SSD environment and 2 10GB cards. In write, I think it was a little bit more modest at around 1,200 megabytes per second write. Those speeds are maintained by cool, effective airflow throughout this device. So ventilation is incredibly important here. If we have a look at the base of this device, and again, I want to scream with pain right now, we have ventilation slots there at the top, and each of the trays have got ventilation built into each of them as well. And each one of those trays has LEDs as well built into them. Even the trays have got ventilation in their bases, and if you look at the front, you can see that ventilation there. And again, there's even the lock-in mechanism on each of the trays. It's spring-loaded, which is always quite welcome as far as I'm concerned. The locks, a little bit underwhelming. They're a bit pointless, really. I mean, I get that most locks on these NASs aren't really going to stand up to anyone with a crowbar in the best, in the best of times. And also, these locks are generally to stop people removing drives that shouldn't be hot swapped or drives that are hot spares so they don't get removed. But at the same time, it has a lock, but it's fairly mundane as far as that sort of stuff goes. On the side of the device, we've got the rails already pre-attached to it. The handles there on the side, and there is a slight dislocking mechanism built into the side there of those handles. We've got LEDs, more LEDs there on the side for system status and alerts. On the subject of alerts, not only is there a power button, which you're very rarely going to touch on this device, but on top of that, this system also has a mute button, something that allows you to, if the system is beeping for alerts of temperature or something to do with drive stuff or a redundant power supply dying, it allows you to mute those alerts manually from the front of it. Now, slight tangent here, I've never understood the point of that mute button, because I get it, the alerts are super annoying. They are really, really annoying when they go off, and you have to log into the GUI, you have to log into the user interface, go into the settings menu, or go via the alert at the top right, and then finally mute it manually via the graphical user interface of Synology's DSM platform. But why is it only available on rack mounts? That's the thing I don't understand, because rack mounts, as you heard from the intro to this video, get super noisy, and the result is that you're not going to be in close proximity with this, whereas a desktop system you're going to be in much closer proximity with. So what I don't understand is, if this device is something you're going to be less likely to be close to, it's less likely to need a mute button than a desktop solution. I know there's the counter argument that you might log in to a PC in an office where there's a desktop NAS a lot easier, but still nonetheless, I think that either they should all have mute buttons or only desktop devices have mute buttons. Maybe you can tell me different. Please, in the comments, tell me why I am wrong, and maybe an instance where having that mute button saved you from a migraine. So Again, loads of ventilation top and bottom on this device. And again, all of those trays working in use and produce an enormous amount of noise. It's rated at, checking my notes, 53.5 dBA when the system is in operation by Synology themselves. We might test it out in a future video talking about rack mount noise. If we remove these trays slightly out of shot, we can have a look at the side. There's a tiny bit of ventilation on that side there. That tiny bit of ventilation, I'm assuming is because there's a little bit more wiring and control built in there. And again, ventilation and operational cooling is key. If we look at the other side, and I scream in pain, I know a number of you are thinking, what a wuss, and cut me some slack, guys. If we look at the side here, we can see there isn't the same ventilation here. It's just got the little bolts for attaching into a rack cabinet with rails as well, all on the base. But also on the top here, we have got the ability to remove this flap, this here, and we have got access to the fans. Now, maintenance on these devices can be very, very tricky. Unless you're running an SHA environment, Synology High Availability, this system will almost always be on. There'll be very, very rare occurrences when it is powered down. Even then, during reboots from firmware updates and more, this system will just be on the whole time. So cleaning and maintaining and making sure airflow is untouched is going to be really, really tough. Luckily, you can remove these when the system is in operation. It will alert you, and they are identified there, but it will allow you to perform maintenance on this system even when it's in operation. I mean, ideally, you shouldn't really be doing it, but it's still nice to have that option that cleaning and looking after the system is indeed possible without powering it down there. And again, if we have a look there, we can see all three fans. So again, you don't even have to remove all of them, and that panel isn't locked or anything, although the top panel that we'll remove in a bit is. But it's nice and easy to be able to access that inside. So again, let's have a look at the rear ports. Let's pop that there. I could cut this out, but I'm not going to. I think you guys are just enjoying watching to see if I'll break. So if we look at the rear of this device, we can see a few things straight away off the bat. First and foremost, an enormous amount of ventilation. Again, I know I'm labouring this point, but it is very, very important. These systems are generally designed to have air passing through them horizontally. Unlike a NAS where they ventilate the side panels a little bit more, maybe the base as well underneath the storage media in a desktop, this rack mount, it can't take advantage of all of that because often these devices are going to be stacked. So they can't really have any vertical ventilation in any kind, and they have to pass air through like a jet engine. So with this, the ventilation here working in conjunction with those fans that we've seen here, we've got the additional fans built here into each of those two PSUs that we'll talk about in a bit, and lots of ventilation there on the front panel to make sure this all passes through the system is key to this RS2821RP Plus achieving what speeds it can. Now, the PSUs, as mentioned, are removable. You don't even have to power down the device in order to get into them. We can remove them straight away there, nice and simple. And again, they're custom made, so again, you can't buy these from a third-party vendor. You can't go ahead and use the PSU from most other Synology Rackstations and install it inside this device. It's a 550 watt PSU, which is pretty aggressive actually for a system that, although it has 16 bays of storage and it has a single PCIe slot, I'm not sure that equates, given the hardware upgrades this thing supports, to the use of 550 watts. But I will add that this does have a lot of active cooling inside, and additionally, the system also has just a sheer weight of storage and power around it. So maybe as these bigger drives, these 18 or even 20 TB drives arrive, that's when these larger PSUs are going to live up to their name. Now, each one of them, when the system does suffer a problem, you're going to get all those alerts and notification stuff in the control panel. You know, you're going to know when it needs to be replaced. But the fact that you don't have to power it down is one of the main reasons that I've said in a previous video that redundant power supplies and a UPS are basically essential in a business as far as I'm concerned. The fact that there's only a couple of desktop devices out there that have got redundant PSU functionality built into them, I think is a real shame. So it's good to see that this device as standard arrives with that, given the enormous amount of volume of storage inside. Now, if we look at the base here, we can see a few ports. Let's get that lifted up there. First and foremost, we have got here, this is a comms port. This is to integrate the system into an existing storage array, and so not storage array, maintenance array for your business. It's not really a GUI possible from that. It's not VGA, it's just a comms port. But a lot of people hope for more, but not. Over here, we have got the expansion port. It's using a mini SAS connector here, which is great because a number of the Rackmount solutions like the RS820 and the RS2821 Plus, as mentioned, these take advantage of an eSATA expansion, which is 4 bays. So they can get away with that at eSATA once you break down 6 gigabit over eSATA on 4 disks. It's not ideal if you're going to use SSDs, but it's still not too shabby. Whereas this device having that large degree of connectivity there, once you attach the 12-bay expansion, the RX1217, that's a lot of storage to be playing with. That's 28 drives potential for this system. Don't get me wrong, I think the CPU and memory inside this might gutter ball out at that level. I'll be surprised if you can exceed, with a couple of 10G ports externally, more than 2,500. Even though that media should give you that, I don't think that CPU is going to really push out that much. A couple of USB ports there, which, let's be completely realistic, Synology have not exactly been, breaking the mold about what you can do with USB connectivity on their systems. Short, obviously it is USB 3.2 Gen 1 or just USB 3, basically 5 gigabit USB. And they're mainly used for storage. There's a few peripherals, and of course things like UPSs or making printers and scanners and stuff network accessible, which at this scale and where this is going to be deployed is pretty useless. Also, you can assign them to VMs as well, which is good, but you can't really utilize them for much in the way of network upgrades like you can with like 2.5G and 5G upgradable network interface to USB adapters. There's no official support. There's a few 1GBE, but who cares? You've already got 4 of those, which actually does lead me on to these network connections. And this is where we talk about Synology just seemingly being a bit safe, because a number of people, myself included, have kind of been a bit saddened by Synology's continued use of 1GBE on their more recent systems. I get it. They, with a lot of their, again, the XS, the SA, the FS series, these big enterprise level systems have all got 1 or 2 10G ports all over them. Synology have even started working on a number of those FC cards, the 25GBE stuff, and with the iSCSI Manager in DSM7 becoming SAN Manager, you've got a clear indication of where the brand wants to go in terms of their storage becoming priority in most businesses and wrapping businesses around it. But nevertheless, given the scale of this device, so remember, over $3,000 this device costs, and an enormous level, 16 drives that can go up to 28 drives with the expansion, 1GBE is a bit of a cop-out. And if one thing throughout this video I'm going to repeat over and over again, it is this device, as good as it is, and I genuinely believe it is good, arrives with the idea you're going to have to upgrade this either internally or externally within the first 2 years as your utility scales. If you use this to its fullest potential, very early doors you're going to find you're going to have to upgrade the memory, upgrade the network interface ports. Just lots of ways it's going to have to be scaled up. And I think of all the areas of this that I think Synology played it a little safe, those 1GBE ports, I think no one's really going to argue with me on that. 4 ports with link aggregation or failover, great stuff. Get up to 4GBE, great stuff. But if you had one 10G port there, you could share that with 10 other devices to have 100 or so megabytes per second throughput each. Share it with 20 and give them 50. It's just, the 1GBE for me on this is just leaving a little bit of a bitter taste. Now, there is a PCIe upgrade slot as mentioned. This device supports pretty much all of the Synology PCIe upgrade cards, again, from standard network interface increases in 10GB and dual 10GBE cards to the 25GBE cards that we've mentioned earlier. There's a few Mellanox and Intel-based cards as well, going up to 40GBE as well, something I'm hoping to try on this, but it's still early doors. But on top of that, there's obviously Synology's more recent cards, such as the M2D20, a 2-port NVMe SSD card that allows you to include caching on this, and of course, the better card in my opinion, the E10M20T1, that card that has got a 10GBE port and SSD caching. Now, when that card was announced, I think a lot of us, and particularly in the comments, I saw that as well. When that card came out, a lot of solutions afterwards started arriving with PCIe slots and M2 NVMe cache, leading to a lot of people thinking this card is great. You know, it's a PCIe Gen 3x8 card for a PCIe Gen 3x8 slot, great stuff. But so many of these systems, particularly the desktop Ryzens as well, arrived with NVMe SSD caching bays, the M2 slots, already inside. So the card seemed like it arrived, and then the more modern desktop releases were like, yeah, we don't need that card. It's only been the rack mount solutions that have arrived that don't have M2 NVMe slots. Indeed, I think almost all of the rack mount solutions from Synology do not have M2 slots. I think the 1619XS is one of the only ones that has it. Now, is that a PCIe lane limitation? I'm not sure, but it seems weird that we have seen things like the 8-bay rack mount and the 8-bay desktop. One of them has M2, the other one doesn't. Same hardware configuration all the way through. But still, nonetheless, it's still good that Synology allowed this device to take advantage of the full gamut of their cards inside this. And of course, they have their own NVMEs as well for that card too. So again, a PCIe Gen 3x8 slot there, so a potential 8,000 megabytes per second throughput between the card and the system means that you are going to have a huge bandwidth to play with regards to 10GBE, dual port 10GBE, some of those higher end SFP cards and more. Next, let's get this lid off of here and take a good look inside this system to see the arrangement of chips and see if there's any surprises for us there. I'll be honest, I was fully expecting there to be a lot more screws than just the one here at the back. So we get that off of there. We're removing that top old lid. Pop that down there and get this device up here for you guys. Now, again, to set this up so the light there isn't going to be too much of a problem. So straight away, what are we seeing inside here? Well, first and foremost, we've got those multi-lane cables here at the top. Let's move that round there. The multi-lane cables here at the top are feeding into for one cable for each 4 bays. On top of that, I'll have to move that there. On top of that, we have got the CPU here underneath this heatsink. So again, that is that Ryzen V1500B. It's a quad-core 2.2 gigahertz AMD processor. It's an x86 64-bit chip. Again, it doesn't have embedded graphics, but what I will say is this has been a very, very good CPU for not only Synology, but QNAP as well in the last 6 months or so. It supports the entire gamut of Synology's range of first-party applications, and there's a lot to be said for what it's bringing in terms of throughput and affordability on these NAS systems. I remember, 7-8 months ago, the idea of Synology using an AMD chip was unheard of. So it's fantastic. They've really embraced it here. Underneath, we've got these 2 slots here, which are utilizing DDR4 ECC UDIMM memory. Now, it arrives with one 4GB module by default. But, of course, there is upgradability. Synology do insist that you use their memory modules. Their compatibility list only lists theirs because they say if you use an unsupported configuration, they can't really honour and support that warranty inside and promise that they can assist you all the way along. 4GB of memory, as much as I do like that CPU and its balanced performance versus price point, I think 4GB on a 16-bay NAS, particularly one that can be expanded in this way, and with upgrades possible on the PCIe lane, I do think that 4GB is a bit stingy. I get why 4GB was included in the 8-bay. I can even sort of justify the 4GB on the 12-bay, but I think you're pushing it a bit there. But on a system of this scale, when throughput is going to be key, the sheer volume of performance possible with 16 bays of storage, even enterprise level hard drives, those HAT5300s are 7200 RPM and 256 megabytes of cache. They are going to put through some serious read-write there. So 4GB of memory has the potential to be an annoying bottleneck that you're going to have to upgrade relatively early doors. And again, if you're looking at virtualization, looking at surveillance, even more so. But still, it's good that they're using UDIMM here. I think most of the generations before this, I don't think that 24, 21, all use SODIMM, and UDIMM does kind of promise high performance. I think it goes up a little higher as well in terms of the potential megahertz as well. But again, we've got the 2 PSUs down here, and at the top we've got that PCIe lane there. That PCIe lane, if the light isn't going to absolutely ruin it, there, which is PCIe Gen 3 times 8 there. And again, because this is a 3U device, the card can be quite tall, as you can see there. So again, we've got the fans there at the top of the device as well. And again, it's quite a well laid out system. We've got the controller board there. If I bring that closer to camera, we can see that controller board fairly clear, plenty of space there for that airflow throughout this device. And again, airflow is kind of the big thing here. With regards to airflow on this, as mentioned, noise is going to be a problem. Well over 53.5 rated dBA as mentioned, but power consumption as well. Even Synology's own figures rate this device at nearly 100 watts power utilization when in operation and close to 50 watts in idle. That's quite a beastly device. Again, kind of gives a little bit of a nod there to those external PSUs. When the system is being utilized, that CPU and that memory, Synology do say that it can provide around 2,200 and so megabytes per second read. I know I already mentioned that at the top of the video, but what I think is key is when they presented those figures on their official site, that is utilizing their own SSD. So that was the speed that was achieved with 16 SSDs. What I would raise is, I know with these drives that I have got with 4 of these drives, close to 1,000 megabytes per second. I think I got maybe 800, 850 with 4 of these enterprise drives in a RAID 0 environment. So I think if this device was fully populated with the HA5300s, unless there's some sort of CPU bottleneck at that 2,200 or so, and I'm not noticing, I do think you can achieve close to those speeds with hard drives, not just SSDs. Because I think that is the juncture where this CPU is going to start to be, whoa, slow down there. We've only got 2 sets of hands. The system is available, again, for about 3,000 odd quid, which once you look at the greater portfolio, makes a bit of sense. I think the tier underneath is just over 2. But again, do scale it up when you're looking at this, because at this point, when you've got that level of storage, there's a very good chance you're going to be looking at Xeon after this, because that's where your budget's going to go. I think the tier above this is about 4.5, maybe 4,200, and that's when you're entering the SA series or the RS2821XS Plus. So those are the systems where your budget's going towards the internal hardware resources. Now, I said I wouldn't talk about software, and I'm not really going to talk about it, but I think it would be remiss not to mention it here at the end of the video. The software on this, it supports the lot. I've already touched on that, but let's really flesh that out. When I say it supports the lot, it really, really does. You name it, it does it. Synology Drive, Synology Office, Synology Chat, Synology Mail, Synology Calendar, Synology, all of it. On top of that, with the likes of the iSCSI Manager and SAN Manager in DSM-7, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of your storage and how you can interact with it. You've also got, of course, RAID support, traditional RAID all the way through RAID 0, 1, 5, 6, 10, and the bundled RAIDs as well, 50s and 60s, as well as Synology's hybrid RAID configuration. On top of that, you've got snapshots as well to play with. You've got cloud synchronization there with third-party clouds and Synology's own C2 cloud service. You've got Active Backup Suite, that great one portal, widespread enterprise grade backup management platform. Then again, that integrates into Office 365 and Google Workspaces. On top of that, you've got Hyper Backup, which compared with Active may seem a little bit more chewable, user-friendly, but it's still an incredibly capable tool for managing a widespread backup strategy overall. And then you can break the rest of the tools that the Synology DSM platform arrives with into kind of home and prosumer and into business and enterprise. So your home and prosumer, you've obviously got your Synology Moments or Synology Photos there in the future. Photo station, video station, audio station, you know, those kind of chewy multimedia applications that are fun that, let's be realistic, you are never going to use on this. But on the other end of the scale, you have got Synology Surveillance Station application. This device will support up to 40 cameras comfortably, but again, those 40 cameras, you're going to need more memory. 4 gig of memory and 40 cameras, fat chance. You're going to have to really upgrade that pretty far. And again, you can only use Synology memory. Bear that in mind. With those cameras, you get 2 camera licenses included, which is a little stingy, I think. I know a lot of the brands have got this model where with their licenses, They've allowed it so that home users that buy the NAS can still use the great software and they get a few camera licenses. But if you're a business user, in order to make sure that the surveillance platform can evolve over time, they give you some free licenses, but a business user is obviously going to use more. So they charge 30, 50 quid per camera license. That said, and as understandable as that is, and not everyone agrees with it, I'm not going to give you my opinion yet, but what I will say, at this level, at well over £3,000, I would have kind of liked 4 camera licenses. 2 seems a bit tight. Then you've got virtualization on this. It supports, obviously, integration with your existing Hyper-V and VMware environments. But on top of that, they've got their own Synology Virtual Machine Manager. And again, the integration of VMs into their backup tools that I mentioned earlier, beautifully done. Synology themselves say this can be recommended up to scenarios with, they recommend it up to 8 VM scenarios in system, but obviously if you use it as target storage for third-party VM vendors, you can actually go a lot greater, more integrated with that. You've got VPN support and VPN server from Synology on this device, and again, they've been doing a lot of free stuff with their VPN service, I think mainly with the router side of things, but still do look into that because it's probably one of the most evolved and probably more user-friendly VM integration systems I've seen from a number of the brands. They've been incredibly user-friendly with a subject that is arguably not as straightforward as going, put on a VPN, you'll be safe, bruh. It's really not that straightforward. And I think they do a very good job of finding a line between that. But let's conclude. What about this device do I like? 1, I love that level of storage. I think Synology, who do very well on their software, this level of storage, a lot of people are going to be very, very engaged in terms of scalability and future-proofing. What else do I like? Of course, I love that Ryzen CPU. I like it. I think it's a great price point versus what you're getting, what it's actively able to do. I like the fact that this system has a number of ways it can be maintained whilst in operation without powering the device down. And I like, things like the fans, things like just the general design of set up and forget, but also interaction with ease. What don't I like so much? I think let's summarise them all up. 1, I'm not keen on 1 GBE. I think at this level, I think it's a poor show by Synology to go with 1 GBE on a device of this scale. I get they're trying to keep it within the product family, but I think at that point they should have maybe considered 2.5 GBE or a single 10G and a single 1. I think the chipset might be able to play with that. 4 gig of memory seems a little tight. Just over £3,000 early doors, and I think 8 gig would have been the accepted minimum on a system like this. I'm not hugely keen on that, and I don't quite like the fact it doesn't have M2 NVMe slots already pre-installed. Yes, they've got that combo card, which I have raved about. I bloody love that card. It's right here, in fact. This card here, I think, does so much, and they took something that like QNAP brought their combo card out, and they brought out, I think, what many argue is an incomplete version of that card with a PCIe Gen 2x4 connectivity, and just throttled and bottlenecked in a number of ways. And then Synology came along with this premium card that takes advantage of much longer M2 NVMe's, takes advantage of PCIe Gen 3x8, so the bandwidth is lovely and high. But all that said, I think these NVMe slots should have been inside this early doors, particularly at this level of scale. And also, I'm less keen at the apparent, I'm going to use that word, apparent, locking of just Synology hard drives. Yes, there is flexibility there with regards to migration from other systems. Yes, there's flexibility with Synology in some ways if you contact them about if they don't have a certain storage available that you need. I accept there's flexibility, but if you look online, it has the appearance that you are restricted to just the majority of Synology's own drives with maybe 2 or 3 exceptions there. Those are the only things I don't like. Do I think it's worth £3,000? I think it might be. I think it's, tipping into the £3,000 territory at this storage level. I think it's definitely in that ballpark. I'm just not sure it's a complete solution. And I do believe that when you buy this, you're going to get a lot out of it. And that software, again, but you're going to upgrade something about it in the first 2 years, and that's going to be the network interface card, it's going to be the memory inside, it's going to be something, you're going to upgrade something. And I think even the rails, for God's sake, this device arrives with a few loose thread caveats that I think they could stand to address before release. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. There is a review in the description there going to NAS compares with a lot more detail, a lot more photos, a lot more close-up stuff. And yes, there's going to be the software overview and the performance testing of this device very, very shortly. So do check those out. If you enjoyed this, click like. It helps me, and then I know what you guys like. I know these reviews go on a bit long, but I have to make them on the assumption that a lot of people watching this do not know about Synology, so I've got to cover all the bases. Click subscribe if you want to learn more. And if you want some free, completely impartial advice on setting up your device for the first time, don't ask me in the comments. Go to NAS Compares to the free advice section. It's manned by me and Eddie the web guy, and we give free, impartial, unbiased. We're not going to charge you. It might take us a day or two to answer your email because we're only 2 human beings, but it's free advice. It's supported by donations. It's supported by the odd bit of affiliate marketing, but nonetheless, we will not charge you a penny, and we'll help you get the right data storage solution for your needs. So take advantage of that. There's a link in the description. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.